guys, so I'm here today to tell you all about the books that I read in the second half of March, which equates to 5 plus a DNF. So I'm going to give you little reviews and summarise my thoughts on each of those books in this video. If you're interested in the books I read in the first half of March, then I had a mid-month wrap-up that I will link down below. Unfortunately, things didn't stay as high as they were at the beginning of the month. There was a few more like average and not so great reads for me in this second half. But thankfully there was at least one 4-star. So without further ado, let's jump straight into the books. So the book that you might have seen me mention in the first half of the month was Charlie Bone and the Time Twister, because I started reading this during the Femme Fantail readathon, which I did an entire vlog for, so did mention this. I listened to the audiobook, which I borrowed from my library, and it was actually a reread for me. So this is part of the Charlie Bone series by Jenny Nemo, the first book in which is Midnight for Charlie Bone. And I reread that last year and really enjoyed it. This was a series I really liked when I was a child. However, I don't think I finished the last few books because I kind of grew out of it. And when I saw that my library had a few of them on audiobook, I thought I would go back and return to that series, maybe follow through right to the end. So I was continuing that reread with Charlie Bone and the Time Twister. Now, I didn't love this one as much as the first one. I just don't think the plot in this one is quite as captivating as it was in the first one. Now, the premise of these books, if you don't know, is that they follow Charlie Bone, who is a young boy with a special gift. His gift is that he can hear what people were thinking or talking about when photographs of them were taken. So he looks at photographs and he can hear what was going on at that time. And he, for that reason, is sent to Bloor's Academy, which is a school for gifted children. Now, most of the children there are simply gifted in like ordinary things like art or drama or music, whereas there's like a small contingent of students who have these kind of more magical gifts, and they're supposedly descendants of this mythical Red King. And they all have different kind of gifts. So we've got like someone that talks to animals, we've got somebody that can control the weather, etc, etc. In the first book there is an overarching plot as well as some like mysteries that are set up that you know are going to continue into the rest of the series. And like I said, I know a lot of things that eventually happen in this series because I have read them before, but I only ever read them through once, and like I said, didn't manage to read the last couple, but had read this one before. So I did know the plot vaguely in the back of my mind. I could vaguely remember it, but rereading it wasn't as exciting as I found rereading Midnight for Charlie Bone, even though I remember the plot from that one. It was a 3-star read. It wasn't a bad book. I remember enjoying it the first time around. I just think like it didn't have as much to offer on a reread. It suffered from second book syndrome, which I think is something that happens with a lot of second books in series. As in, if it's not a duology, I feel like the second book often has to do a lot of grunt work to establish a lot of things that aren't maybe as entertaining to read about in order to set up for the other books in the series. And this unfortunately did kind of suffer from that for me, but I will be continuing on with my reread of the series and reading the third one. There is something I remember happening in the original series, and I can't remember which book it happened in, but I really enjoyed the way that it shifted the plot and some of the characters' relationships, so I'm kind of excited for that to happen again. And I can't remember if it's the next book or the next again, but we will find out shortly. The next book I read, however, was far more disappointing than Charlie Bone, which was just like fun but like nothing special, and that was the Bookmobile by Audrey Niffenegger. This is a graphic novel written and illustrated by Audrey Niffenegger, who you might know from The Time Traveller's Wife. I think that's probably her most famous book, so she does write novels as well, but she's also written and illustrated a few of her own graphic novels. This is my first time ever encountering her work. I've not read or even seen The Time Traveller's Wife, but it was a letdown. However, the one thing I will say is that I know from people who have read her other graphic novels that this is their least favourite, and that they actually really enjoy her other graphic novels but didn't enjoy the Bookmobile. So I don't think this will stop me from reading more of her graphic novels in the future, because I'm intrigued by the premises of some of them, but unfortunately I wouldn't really recommend this one. My library had it, so I borrowed it from my library, and I'm kind of glad I didn't spend money on it. I also just realised I've been calling it the Bookmobile. It's the Night Bookmobile, apologies for that. The art was fine, it was like well illustrated. She obviously has an aptitude for art, although it wasn't necessarily a style that I fell madly in love with and was like drooling over the images as a reader. But I also just found the story really eye-rolling. It was very, very heavy-handed and came to a conclusion that I didn't think was particularly impressive or effective or something that I agree with. It felt like after I'd finished reading it, I was being told I shouldn't read books because it's a waste of my life, and I know that's like an extreme interpretation, but I think because the book was so heavy-handed, that's where it felt like it was going. It's about a woman who encounters what is called the Night Bookmobile on a nightly stroll around the city, and this is a like mobile library with a librarian who she meets, and she goes inside and all the books in this library are books that she has read. So the library is purely stocked with books that she has read, to the point where it even contains like her childhood diaries, so it's completely personal to her. And she becomes kind of obsessed with this Night Bookmobile, and it's how that obsession with this library and what she's reading just effectively destroys her life. It wasn't for me. Heavy-handed and unimpressive was kind of how I felt. But like I said, I think I will still read more by her and see if any of her other plots jive with me a little bit more. Another book that was a little bit disappointing, and I will talk about more in another video, is Dead Girls by Alice Boleyn. This is an essay collection, and it is the Feminist Orchestra read for April, so the first one for 2019 that Lauren and I picked, and we will be doing a discussion video together where we sit down and discuss the book in detail, so look out for that. I think that's going up on my channel, but regardless we will be sharing on Twitter, etc. And I enjoyed parts of this book and didn't enjoy other parts. It was sort of like a 3-star average read for me again. The premise of this book sounded fascinating. It kind of is marketed as an essay collection that explores the concept of dead girls, which is the sort of like use of female bodies and female victims of crimes in fiction, but also sometimes like in the media, to explore the internal struggles and growth of male characters, and that these like dead bodies, these dead girls, have no personality or character of their own, and they're simply there to explore the man's story. And I think that is such a fascinating concept, and the first few essays in this collection are on that, and they are so interesting. So there was definitely essays in this collection that were 4 verging on 5-star, but then there was essays in this collection that were like 2 stars. I think I'm not really an essay collection person when it comes to essay collections like this, because this essay collection is far less about the topic of dead girls throughout than it is about Alice Boleyn. It is her essays on her life, her experience, particularly moving to Los Angeles, her experience reading and her expectations of Los Angeles, how Los Angeles sort of met with these expectations. It is an essay collection on Los Angeles. That is what it is, and it is not marketed as that, and that is my main problem. Whereas some of the essays explore this dead girl topic, and I see that in her narration. I listened to this audiobook on Scribd. She talks about how she feels this book strings together, but I think it only strings together in her head. It doesn't really string together for me as a reader anyway. It just feels more like interesting little columns or blog pieces from somebody's life, and she is a good writer, and like I said, there was essays where it would pique my interest once again because it maybe be exploring a topic I was interested in, but it very much dropped off of that main premise that I had gone into it for early on, and then went off on tangents that I wasn't interested in. It wasn't for me, it wasn't my cup of tea, and I feel like it was not what I expected it to be, unfortunately. But like I said, there was elements to it that were interesting. Like, if you could just read those essays on the dead girls concept, I would highly recommend it because they were so fascinating, and that's a topic I'd like to discuss more and read more about. However, overall, it didn't live up to my expectations, and then I read a book that I did really enjoy, thankfully, and that is The Tower of Thorns, which is the sequel to Dreamer's Pool and the second in the Blackthorn and Grimm series by Juliette Marillier, who y'all know I love, right? We all know I love Juliet Marillier, and I love this book too. This book is a fantasy book set in medieval Ireland, and we follow Blackthorn and Grim. Blackthorn is a wise woman and Grim is sort of her companion, and at the beginning of the first book they escape prison and are sort of given this task by this fairy to set up in this village, this town, whatever it's called, under this Prince Oren, and serve like as the wise woman of that community, and like Grim is sort of like her assistant. He really only joins her because he doesn't want to leave her. And honestly, Blackthorn and Grim are two of my favourite fictional characters. They are brilliant, and they are what carries these books. It's interesting because obviously I don't want to say too much about the sequel, but it follows them on their journey, continuing on from the second book. They've kind of got a new mystery to solve, because one of the elements of these books is that there is really very much a central mystery involving some sort of like magic at the centre of each book. It's a trilogy, and I'm assuming the same thing's going to be true of the third one, and in that way they've got like this little element of like detective Sherlock Holmesy fiction to them whilst being fantasy set in medieval Ireland, and I love that because I love a little mystery. And Blackthorn and Grim have to save the day, which I'm totally there for, although there are darker elements because they have their own pasts which are full of like dark moments that they're uncomfortable sharing with other people. But like I said, very much carried by Blackthorn and Grim, and what I found was interesting that loads of people said to me that the second one is their favourite. However, I still prefer the first one. Don't get me wrong, I enjoyed book 2, but I preferred the first one. Dreamer's Pool is my favourite of the two that I have read. I don't know if that will change when I read the third one, but I still think the first one was my favourite. And part of that is because I loved Oren. So Prince Oren is one of the narrators in book 1. He is not one of the narrators in book 2. He's not one of the narrators in book 2. In book 2 the narrators are Blackthorn, Grim and a new character, which seems to be the premise. I assume in book 3 it'll again be Blackthorn, Grim and another character. And I missed Oren's narration. Oren was like, I loved him as a character. I thought he was brilliant. I missed him in the second book. Although he is in it a little bit, he's just not one of the narrators. And I didn't enjoy the third narrator as much in this one. It's not like they compensated for Oren, but I still very much enjoyed it because I love Blackthorn and Grim. I love watching them and their interactions with one another. I love watching them solve mysteries together. I love the medieval Irish fantasy setting, and I'm still in love with this series. I just think because so many people said to me the second one was their favourite, I was surprised when I found that it wasn't mine. But that's not really a criticism because, yeah, I would still highly recommend the series. I think they're brilliant. I love Juliet Marillier. She's a fantastic writer. She's my favourite fantasy author. She's one of my favourite authors of all time, and I go on about her all the time. But last but certainly not least is another graphic novel, or a volume in a comic book series, and that is I Hate Fairyland Volume 2 by Scotty Young. So I Hate Fairyland Volume 1 I read a wee while ago and adored it. It is such a unique concept. It's about a little girl that goes to the fairy world with the intention of staying there for a short time, but she never manages to find her portal out of Fairyland and go back to the human world. So she's been there for over 30 years, I think. She's in her 30s now, and thanks to her inability to escape Fairyland despite wanting to, this has left her not the most well-adjusted person. She's also, I should mention, still in the body of a child, so her body never ages, although she has aged. So she's just still this little girl trapped in Fairyland, and she goes and she turns into a like complete violent mess. And she goes around Fairyland trying to escape, killing loads of other creatures, and it is the weirdest combination of illustrations because there's so much cutesy, colourful art combined with really extreme violence, loads of gore, loads of blood, and I thought that was so much fun. It worked really well, it was really entertaining. Again, like I said, really unique. However, I found in Volume 2 that this is not necessarily a premise that continues to engage me over the course of comic books and comic books and comic books. I think it gets a little bit old, and there wasn't enough of a hook in the second volume, across I think it's 5 issues, to really draw me in. The plot in the first one felt, in the first volume that is, felt more neat and tied together, whereas it felt a little bit like all over the place in the second one, and like we were just repeating the same pattern again and again and again. So although I quite liked returning to the art style and the world, that was fun, I felt like I was kind of done with this world at the end of volume 2. I don't know if I'm going to continue on to volume 3. I'd be interested to hear if you've read the following issues in the series, because I just think like it was fun for a while, but I'm kind of over it now, and there's not enough to really keep me interested beyond that funny little premise, which only lasts so long. But yeah, I would be interested to hear, because maybe the third volume has this epic plot that I should check out. But yeah, that's kind of how I'm feeling about the series at the moment. Although I kind of think you could still read volume 1 as a standalone and enjoy it, and then just leave it at that. I know that's not really what you're meant to say with comic books, but because I liked volume 1 so much, I still think I would recommend it, even though I think it kind of lost its appeal to me after that. However, I did mention there was one book I DNF'd, and this is a book where, I don't know, part of me wonders if I will pick it up and try it again one day, but for now I have definitely DNF'd it, and that is A Court of Thorn and Roses by Sarah J Maas, which is the first in a young adult fantasy series I had heard a lot of mixed things about, so I'd never really been inclined to pick it up. It's a retelling of Beauty and the Beast, and I know some people love it and other people just hate it, and I thought, yeah, I'll leave it, it's not for me probably. However, then somebody mentioned to me that book 2 in the series is a retelling of Hades and Persephone. And you know, I love a Greek myth retelling. It doesn't matter what other people say about a book. If it's a Greek myth retelling, I can't help it, I want to read it. But obviously to read book 2, I needed to read book 1. So book 1 was on audiobook on Scribd, so I thought I'd give it a shot. But I'm not sure it is for me. Part of me still wants to persevere because I still want to read book 2, and I don't know if that's like the right reason to read a series, simply because you want to read the second one because it's based on a myth. However, I've read a lot of Beauty and the Beast retellings of recent years, and I've kind of established what I like in my Beauty and the Beast retellings, and A Court of Thorn and Roses doesn't really tick those boxes. It very much perpetuates that kind of the sisters that hate each other, negative relationships, which may have developed into something more interesting and nuanced as the book went on, because obviously I didn't finish it. I only really read about 25%. But I don't like that. I prefer it when the sisters don't exist or they're friends. That's just what I like, I can't help it. Equally, I found the decisions that the protagonist made early on in the book didn't really make sense to me. I didn't think it was poorly written particularly, and those things might have been explained if I'd carried on, but I just wasn't compelled to carry on. So I don't really have hardcore criticisms of this book. I don't think it's terrible, I don't think you shouldn't read it if it interests you. I just wasn't hooked. And because I know people that don't like it and people that like it, I just feel like there's maybe other books I'd rather spend my time on, unless you really, really think it's worth me persevering and returning to it at some point in the future. But for now, it wasn't really doing it for me, so I think I've tried and I think I'm over it. What can I say? But those are the books that I read in the second half of March, or didn't read. I would love to know your thoughts. If you have read or are interested in reading any of these books, please do leave them down in the comments below. And until next time, happy reading. I'll see you all again soon. Bye guys.